the inverse, sine, cosine and tangent functions. This is part of the graph of sine function, y equals sine x. As we know, when we graph sine x, then we get forever. Okay, and the horizontal line test does not pass. That means this function does not have an inverse. But if we just look at the graph of the sine function from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, okay, negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, then this is an one-to-one function, or the horizontal line test passes. That means this function has an inverse. And let me erase this part. And here is the function. The inverse of sine x is y equals sine inverse x. And this x should be in between negative 1 and 1. And when we take the sine inverse of a number between negative 1 and 1, then the output should be in between negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, just from here to here. Okay, this is sine function, and we are talking about inverse sine function. And by the way, y equals sine inverse x is same as x equals sine y. And these are same thing. Similarly, for cosine, we have a graph going both sides forever, but if we just consider from 0 through pi, then this portion of the graph is an one-to-one function, so it has an inverse, and we denote by y equals cosine inverse x, and this x should be in between negative 1 and 1, and when we take cosine inverse of that number, then the output will be in 0 to pi. Okay, this is cosine function, this is cosine inverse function, and y equals cosine inverse x is same as x equals cosine y. Similarly, for tangent, as we've seen tangent function, we have one graph and we'll have forever. But if we just consider one from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, then the horizontal line test passes. That means we do have an inverse, and we denote that by y equals tangent inverse x, where x is any number. Okay, x can be any number, negative infinity through infinity, and the y, when we get outside, that should be in between negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. In this case, we are not including negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. Look at the distinction between these two. This is for sine inverse, tangent inverse. Here negative pi over 2 and pi over 2 are included. In tangent inverse they are not. Okay, strictly less than. So these are the definitions and domains and range for sine inverse, cosine inverse and tangent inverse functions. In the next video we will use these functions to calculate the exact values.